Well, this suggests that chapters in African agricultural history raise some very new but old problems. You can see it in the old African maps that, in effect, took shape during the slave trade period prior to colonial rule and carved up portions of Africa which were seen for their economic promise. Then there was the scramble for African territory and colonial control. But what's now emerging is a kind of corporate scramble for Africa. Is this a scramble for much needed new investment or a kind of neo-colonial land grab that's in effect victimizing African populations with a new chapter of it, neo-colonial you could call it, but it's sort of corporate colonialism on a massive scale. It circumstance the nation state to the extent that they really have no longer any control over their own food supply, which is being generated, owned, and operated by foreign multinational corporations. This has been criticized and pointed out as an inevitable impact of the politics of ownership, and in effect, the fact that none of the agricultural development schemes can, in fact, in the long run, survive in Africa because they're based on an illusion about the way ecosystems work. Sir David Attenborough has been very powerful in pointing this out, most notably in the last meeting of the Royal Society in London under the presidency of the Duke of Edinburgh. Sir David Attenborough gave a very clear restatement of the Malthusian dilemma that we all face.
There have been prophets who've warned us of this impending disaster, of course. One of the first was Thomas Malthus. His most important book, an essay of the principle of population, was published over 200 years ago in 1798. In it, he argued that the human population would increase inexorably until it was halted by what he called misery and vice. Today, for some reason, that prophecy seems to be largely ignored, or at any rate disregarded. It's true that he did not foresee the so-called Green Revolution, which greatly increased the amount of food that can be produced in any given area of arable land. And there may be other advances in our food-producing skills that we ourselves still can't foresee. But such advances only delay things. The fundamental truth that Malthus proclaimed remains the truth. There cannot be more people on this earth than can be fed.
He concluded with a summation of the Malthus point of view that made it clear the current strategies of African food production will not meet, because they cannot meet, the current projected trajectories of Africa's and the world's food needs.
Many people would like to deny that this is so. They would like to believe in that oxymoron, sustainable growth. Kenneth Boulding, President Kennedy's environmental advisor 45 years ago, said something about this. Anyone who believes in indefinite growth in anything physical on a physically finite planet, he said, is either mad or an economist.
It's not that Norman Borlaug foresaw all of these things and worked against the autonomy of African producers. He had no intention of doing that. In fact, he wanted to empower them. But by seeing the impact of what has happened to population growth since the introduction of the Green Revolution technology, and as a result of it, that is, the tripling of the global human population in a record short period of time, something that never happened before in the lifespan of one person, but now is a feature of global agriculture. The human population tripled in the lifespan of one individual born in the late 1940s. Never happened before, won't happen again. But because Norman Borlaug addressed the food problem as one of food scarcity, he forgot the larger context that food is generated in reference to populations, and therefore food and populations are intimately linked over time. And he didn't foresee the interaction of food, population, and the environment as the context in which his policies would have to function long after he died. Those are the problems that the world now confronts. And this is why there's a paradigm shift that's required in addressing these issues, a paradigm shift which he was not prepared for, but his followers at this point are going to have to confront and absorb. Humankind cannot survive future trajectories of current agricultural systems because current practices do not solve the problem of human hunger. Instead, these practices accentuate global and national income inequity and generate the basis for expanded social strife, military conflict, and the syndromes of warfare, migration, and rural income collapse. In the process, these practices effectively expand the absolute numbers of the global poor and generate hunger faster than they can meet the needs of the growing number of the world's hungry populations. A second reason is simple. Current practices deplete topsoil, destroy biodiversity, pollute air, and poison declining water supplies. All of these things are going to be needed in abundant and increasing, not decreasing, supply to provide for stable or growing agricultural production over the long term across the whole world. Thirdly, humankind cannot survive future trajectories of current agricultural systems because current practices are predicated upon an increased, not diminished, consumption of fossil fuels for the production, harvesting, transport, storage, distribution, and preparation of food supplies around the world. Thus, humanity's primary production systems, its agriculture, have come to function within a global food system that is irretrievably dependent on non-renewables. Becoming dependent on non-renewables effectively guarantees that humanity's food system will in time not be renewed. It's about as simple as it gets. For this reason, humankind cannot survive future trajectories of current agricultural systems because the increasing self-destructive character of this petro-intensive model of agriculture is based upon a futile attempt to work with the simple metaphors of market economics in a vastly more complex global ecosystem. Yes, market economics have a role to play in any agricultural system, but in the final analysis, market economics cannot provide the operative logic for any stable and functioning ecosystem because that system cannot be rigged for the principal benefit of just one of its constituent species. It collapses as a system if it's managed for the primary benefit of one of its constituent species. For this reason, and in short, the Borlaug-Gates petro-intensive agricultural strategies will not work for humankind because they cannot work within a functioning and enduring global agro-ecosystem.